It may be crazy, but it's not 30 hours long. So
No.
you have to pick your poison. You can get the good version that makes sense, but takes 30 hours, or you can get us breathlessly shouting names at you for 90 minutes. Make your choice.
In 2017, Universal Studios announced the birth of a new shared universe of monster movies, bringing their classic horror icons into the contemporary franchise film landscape. But after the critical and financial failure of its first installment, the project was indefinitely abandoned. Now, in 2022, the powers that be have called upon one pulp horror devotee and one snarky film critic to unearth the concept. I'm Dylan Roth.
And I'm Dalton Deschain.
Are you afraid of the dark universe?
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe, the podcast where we attempt to resurrect Universal Studios' failed cinematic universe of monster movies one pitch at a time. We are at a crucial point in our dark universe where we are about to wrap up our Phase 2 with our second big crossover film, The Dark Legion 2, as of yet untitled, that takes all of our Universal monster characters and puts them in one movie together. But before we do that, we need to take a second. Now, Dylan and I, just for context, have just finished recording Dracula Lives as we're recording this one, and we are a little insane right
Yes,
now.
it was a very long episode. It was trippy and exhausting.
This episode is either going to be really short or incomprehensible and 3 hours long.
We really hope that it's going to be tight and lucid, because the idea of this episode, in addition to giving a little refresh to all of our listeners who have been with us from the beginning,
Yes.
who have been following our ongoing narrative, we would love for this to be a jumping on point for people who are interested in listening to The Dark Legion 2, but don't necessarily want to listen to 20 to 30 hours of a
30
podcast.
hours of the dark universe we have created.
Yes.
So in case you don't have more than a solid day to listen to our back catalog, this episode should catch you up on what you need to know going forward.
So for those of you who are brand new, here's the basic premise, just expanded a little bit. Dalton and I have been, wink, wink, hired by Universal Pictures to revive the dark universe as an idea. They're sort of their Marvel killer, because they did try to do this.
Yeah, so for historical context, Universal for a long time has been trying to start what they call the Dark Universe, which is their horror MCU. They're going to take all of their classic monsters. For those that don't know, Universal is responsible for the big horror boom in the 1930s by creating such classic films as Dracula, The Wolfman, Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, The Invisible Man,
and then later, like The Creature from the Black Lagoon,
things like that.
As well as little oddities like The Phantom of the Opera and The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
And so they wanted to create an interconnected universe of monster movies, and they started that a while ago. One of their attempts was Dracula Untold, which did so badly. They were like, never mind, we're going to start over.
They didn't even put the Dark Universe branding on it, even though theoretically that was supposed to be the one that launched it, but they weren't feeling it. So they cut all of that stuff.
They scrapped it.
And it doesn't count, and it doesn't count in our universe either.
Yeah. What we're concerned with is that in 2017, they released a little film called The Mummy with Tom Cruise. And you might be saying, hey, I don't remember that. Did that really happen? Yes, it did. A lot of times when I'm pitching this show to like friends, I'd be like, hey, do you remember? So you kind of have to remember that 2017 Tom Cruise Mummy film. They're like, what? What? Did that happen?
Anyway.
The movie was bad.
Vaporized.
Yeah.
Nobody cared. Directed. It was a huge, big budget directorial project for Alex Kurtzman, a perfectly qualified event screenwriter, currently the shepherd of the pretty good television Star Trek wing, but as a director or as someone who execute Tom Cruise's wild vision for what the movie should be, did not work. Not good.
So what's really embarrassing for Universal is that they had already announced a whole slate of films, including Frankenstein with Javier Bardem and A Bride of Frankenstein with Angelina Jolie. And what else?
An Invisible Man with Johnny Depp, which we just jettisoned.
But we decided to pick up the pieces and follow that slate and beyond.
Yes.
So we take the 2017 Mummy as canon. That is our Iron Man. That is fully canon in our dark universe. Then
not only does it count, we have to treat it as the seed from which our entire universe grows.
Yes.
It is as important to our world as Iron Man is to the MCU, no matter what we think of it.
Even though it's not good.
Yes.
And then we followed up with, the Javier Bardem Frankenstein and went from there. We have now made 12
at the time,
films?
yeah, 12 films in our universe. We have added 12, I think, at this point.
In addition, lucky 13, because in
yes,
addition to
the Dark
Mummy,
Legion will be number
movies.
13.
Wow.
Okay, so no, we've
That's
added 11. There's the Mummy, then we added 11 more, and then Dark Legion 2 is the 13th chapter.
So we've made a lot of movies, and there have been a lot of podcast episodes.
Just to be clear, by made a lot of movies, we mean made up a lot of movies that
Yes.
don't exist.
We have written little pitches that we read on this podcast.
And those pitches have expanded from being like 40 pages to being like 60 pages at this point. We're writing most of a movie now for the show. Please support us on Patreon.
We're doing a lot of work over here, but we love doing it. I say not just to convince myself. I'm just kidding. I absolutely love doing this. It's a lot of work. But what we're going to do today, so if you're a new listener, we are going to walk you through our dark universe one film at a time, so you know all of our crazy lore that we've added. I think we've built a very interesting and very fun universe here. And for existing listeners, this will be a refresher because maybe it's been a while since you've listened to some of these. And also maybe just a fun peek behind the curtain, and we'll offer some perspective as we go. We're going to go one movie at a time, and we are going to put 5 minutes on the clock, and each of us has to recap and pitch our films in 5 minutes instead of the 2.5 hours that they can sometimes go. And we'll try to, keep it like that and explain everything that has happened.
Okay. I think that whoever is not pitching should be looking at the clock so we're not distracted by it.
Now, we do, though, and I don't know if we want to time this, but we do have to start with The Mummy.
Oh, I think if we time any of them, it's The Mummy.
We'll to take that down to 2 minutes. No, we'll keep it at 5. But we assume you have not seen the Tom Cruise Mummy film.
And we're always amazed when someone tells us they have.
If you like it, God bless. I have now seen it a number of times because of this podcast, and it has grown on me. There are a lot of things I like about it. You can listen to previous episodes for my growth on The Mummy. I still don't think it's a good movie, but I understand it better.
All right. So because Dalton does the first original pitch on our show, I'm going to take it upon myself to recap The Mummy, which will be really funny because I have only seen it twice, maybe 3 times, compared to Dalton's 5 or 6 times. So
add in details.
Yeah, my time starts now. The Mummy stars Tom Cruise as Sergeant Nick Morton, kind of apparently a U.S. soldier, but really a soldier of fortune who travels to countries where the United States is currently engaged in war and plunders them of cool artifacts and sells them the highest bidder. He has a buddy named Vale, played by Chris Vale, played by Jake Johnson, and the two of them are in Iraq.
Now, you would think Tom Cruise and Jake Johnson would have chemistry. No, they don't.
No one in this movie has chemistry with anyone, with one exception, which I'll get to later.
Yeah.
Now, Nick and Vale are in Iraq, embedded with a U.S. military group, but it's not a war story. What they're there to do is that they want to try and find, they have a stolen treasure map that they want to try and find a cool treasure from. Now, the person that Tom Cruise's character, Nick Morton, has stolen the treasure map from is a character who we love named Dr. Jennifer Halsey.
We love her for what we have done with her.
And
we love Annabelle Wallis.
Played by Annabelle Wallis from *Malignant*. This encounter began because Nick Morton and Dr. Jenny Halsey have a sexual encounter before the movie starts that apparently is embarrassingly short because this movie is not very funny, and they think that's funny.
It's the only joke in the movie.
Yes.
And they tell it 5 times.
They follow the map together, the 3 of them, and they accidentally awaken a living mummy named Amenet. Now, important lore here that you get 3 times during the film. Amenet was a princess of Egypt, thousands of years ago, who was passed over for the throne by her infant stepbrother. And out of revenge for that oversight, she murders the entire rest of her family. But she does this by making a pact with the Egyptian god of death, Set.
A name you're going to hear a lot. Remember Set, the Egyptian god of death.
Set is our Thanos. Yeah, basically. So...
Don't
know about that?
I don't know about that, but he's important.
He's important.
We got a lot to talk about.
Yes. All right, halfway through. Okay, they release Amenet. And Amenet, in order to complete her pact with Set, needs to bring Set into our world by giving Set a vessel of his own, which she will do, I think, by boinking and also by stabbing a guy.
It's the dagger. It's
yes.
There's a dagger of
She
Set.
needs to stab a guy who is her betrothed, who she chooses to be the new body of Set. And she chooses Nick Morton. Now, this happens in a really weird, contrived way. Nick dies in a plane crash and then comes back to life because he's been cursed by the mummy, but he does not have Set yet. He's just cursed to be not dead.
Don't worry about it.
Anyway, this all leads them to team up with this old paramilitary organization called Prodigium.
You have 2 minutes.
I can do it in 2 minutes.
Okay.
Prodigium is basically S.H.I.E.L.D., but they fight monsters, and their Nick Fury is Dr. Henry Jekyll, played by Russell Crowe.
Yes.
Who rocks.
He's great.
He's my
awesome
favorite thing
in this movie.
And Jekyll is, as you would imagine, he's sort of the host of some kind of malevolent force, which is called Mr. Hyde, who is super strong and evil. Now, what he wants to do is to allow Aminette to stab Nick so that Set goes into Nick's body and then vaporize Nick, therefore ending the threat of Set. Nick doesn't want to do that because he doesn't want to die. So they all wrestle over this whole thing. Aminette gets free. There's a big struggle between Nick, Aminette, and Dr. Halsey, during which Dr. Halsey is briefly killed. Now, even though they have no chemistry whatsoever together, Nick and Halsey are totally in love, and so the Nick, in order to save her, allows himself to be stabbed by this dagger, so he becomes the host of Set. And even though that should be bad, the sheer power of this love that he has for this woman he met a couple days ago allows him to seize control of Set, bring Jennifer Halsey back to life, and destroy Aminette for good, probably.
Yeah.
But he's now the host of this evil god, and so he cannot be with her. He must walk the earth.
He is cursed, and the god is trying to take over, and he is a monster now.
Yes, so now he's the monster who will potentially fight other monsters. And so he must now walk the earth looking for a cure to his curse. And he's also brought his buddy Vale, who at some point during the story dies, back to life as his sort of minion. And Prodigium is going to keep hunting monsters. He's going to keep looking for a solution to the problem. And that's where we're left in our story. 15 seconds left on the clock.
Boom.
Fuck yeah.
All right. And so clearly it's doing a lot of work to try to set up a universe, which was good and bad because it gave us a lot of toys to play with. Jekyll and Hyde, obviously. And some toys, though, that we didn't like Prodigium, although we have continued to use Prodigium, although we tried to use it in a better way.
We've changed the nature of a lot of these things. And you can go, if you want to hear a full hour of us figuring out what from that movie we want to use and
the first episode,
recapping it in much greater detail, hop back to the beginning of the show. And you'll hear us write a lot of checks that we then don't cash. We wrote different, arguably much bigger checks instead. But
yes, we have instead.
I make some broad proclamations about what I don't want this show to do that we then did a lot, but I think pretty well.
Yeah.
All right. So then we had the task of adding our first original installment to that universe, which was Dalton's take on Frankenstein. Dalton, I'm putting 5 minutes on the clock.
Hold on.
Okay.
Before we get into the recap, I feel like we should talk a little bit about what our vision was for the film.
Okay.
Coming out of The Mummy, I needed to kick off our dark universe. It was on me to reinvent this thing into something that hopefully listeners would want to hear and want to follow us on. And I had to do it with one of the most iconic characters of all time and a character that has been done to death, Frankenstein. To the point of parody, right? Like Young Frankenstein is now like 40 years old.
Yeah, wow.
So it's so hard to find a new take on that, but I thought it was up to me to right the ship from The Mummy and go straight low-key horror. Instead of this big military action vehicle for a movie star, I wanted to do something smaller and contained and scary to sort of pull us back from the brink that The Mummy took us to. So, also we'll be throwing to clips from these movies as well.
Yes, that's your starting here. I mean, I guess we could put a clip from The Mummy in, but then, the episode might get taken down, so we won't do that.
And nothing in that movie is worth that risk.
There's nothing worth listening to.
So I am going to recap the Frankenstein movie to the best of my memory. I'm doing this off the top of the dome. We did not write these down. So forgive me, especially my brain is fried right now, as you can probably tell.
We are into hour 4 of our recording today. So.
Yes. In the middle, I'll throw to a clip, which will not count against my time.
Okay, I'll pause it.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, no, I won't have to pause it.
We're not.
You can trim around a lot of this.
Yeah. We are not making sense. Welcome if this is your first episode.
They're all so much cleaner than this.
We are usually so much more eloquent, and we write a lot of stuff down. But hey, that's the fun of this, is that this is us at our looniest trying to recap an entire cinematic universe. So, without further ado, put me on the clock.
Boom.
My Frankenstein movie takes place in 1831, contemporary with Mary Shelley's novel. It does not show the creation of the creature. In my opinion, the creation of Frankenstein's monster is like Uncle Ben and Spider-Man. It is not something we need to see on screen again. It has been done to death in a million different ways. So my movie begins, Frankenstein's monster is already been wandering the earth for a couple years, and he's kind of a body horror take on it. Like, all of the stitching on him is perpetually infected and red and swollen and oozing blood and pus. He's in pain constantly, but he can't die. He's tried and he can't. Everywhere he goes, he's killing people because he is filled with rage because of what his body is like. He has no love in his life. Nobody will be his friend. He is very lonely, and he has the emotional intelligence of like a child. And so he's killing a bunch of people, and he comes across a young woman. And at first, we don't know their relationship. We think maybe he's trying to kill her. What we come to find out is that she is his creator. Her name is Caroline Clerval. She's just got married to a doctor named Henry Clerval, and she is the one who made this monster. And then what we all learn, along with the monster, is that he was created from the body parts of her father, Victor Frankenstein. Victor Frankenstein in this film was a doctor, not a reviver of life, but just a standard doctor whose daughter is now
the Frankenstein of our.
Yeah. I'm getting stressed out by the clock.
Yes.
Victor Frankenstein, his daughter starts pursuing the sciences, and he kicks her out of the house. She is furious, and when he ends up dying along with his wife of scarlet fever, she gets revenge on him by reviving him and rebuilding him. But he comes back without his memories and wanders the countryside alone, not knowing that he is his mother's father, essentially. And our monster, aka Victor Frankenstein, is outraged at this and learns that he once had a wife before he died. He had a bride. He had someone to love him. So he convinces Caroline to take her mother's body and build him a bride. They retreat to the old Castle Frankenstein, and it's sort of a battle of wills, as Caroline does not want to revive her mother and give this monster a bride. She wants to kill the monster, and the monster just wants his wife.
Right, but he's coercing her to this. He's threatening her husband.
Yeah, he's threatening her husband and her friends and things like that. They start to make the bride, and she starts to come to life, and a shock from the electricity sparks Victor, and he remembers everything from his previous life as Caroline's father. Caroline then sabotages the whole thing and sets her mother's corpse ablaze. Victor, in a rage, hunts Caroline down, trying to kill her, but before he can kill her, he remembers his past life as her father and saves her life, and out of guilt, retreats to the North Pole, where he will be there forever and just sort of live in isolation out of guilt, until he is found by Dr. Jennifer Halsey in the present day, in a very Captain America-like scenario. How'd I do?
There's a minute left on the clock. If you
a
want
minute left.
If you want
wow.
a minute and 20 seconds. If you want to clarify anything,
I think that's basically it. The important thing is
Frankenstein is the monster.
Yes,
his name is Victor Frankenstein,
and he's Frankenstein's monster.
He's played by Javier Bardem.
Yes,
he's a big pus-filled patchwork brute, but he speaks. He has an intellect. He is like the novel's Frankenstein's monster, in the sense that he is not the Boris Karloff wordless guy, but he has a darkness to him that he is constantly fighting.
And now, classic for our brains being fried, I forgot to throw to the clip, but here is a clip where you can hear the monster being eloquent and demanding that Caroline build him his bride. You preserved your mother's body as you did your father's, correct? What? No, of course not. Do not lie to me, the monster screams and squeezes Henry until he cries out. Knowing what you know about life after death, you would never condemn your mother to rot in a grave. I would imagine she is being held at your family's castle in the mountains of Jura, where I was born. You will take me there, and you will build my missing half. I would sooner die, foul creature. The monster lifts up Henry's arm, gripping it in the middle of the forearm. He squeezes, and Henry cries out in agony, until finally something snaps and his arm breaks askew. The monster stands and throws Henry to the floor. I will give you 1 week to change your mind. So there's a little clip from our Frankenstein episode, kicked off our dark universe, made it very dark again, and also took place in the past, which then left it to Dylan to pick up the present day situation following The Mummy with his take on The Wolfman.
Now, for my Wolfman, I immediately had to eat some crow because during our first episode, talking about what we did and didn't want to do with our dark universe I was like, you know what? Universal clearly was trying to make Marvel movies. They were trying to do big action blockbusters. We should be making horror movies.
Yeah.
And then I went ahead and basically made a superhero movie about 2 werewolves.
This has been an ongoing thing where if you've listened up until Dracula Lives, I have been harping on Dylan to make a straight-ahead horror movie.
And now I've done it!
And he finally did.
We
he
can
finally did
shut
it
up
with the
about
Dracula.
it now.
Yes, we never have to talk about it again. We're putting that to rest.
So, put 5 minutes on the clock. I'm going to tell you all about my Wolfman.
3, 2, 1, go.
So, the Wolfman is a two-hander. We do have a Wolfman named Larry Talbot, like the original 1941 Universal Wolfman, played by Mason Gooding from the Scream movies. But he's not the only werewolf in the story. It's actually following the story of both boy billionaire college student Larry Talbot, who's the heir to a mining fortune in Northern California, and also one of his college classmates named Gwen Conliffe, after the love interest in the 41 Wolfman, played by Amber Midthunder. So you have, basically, we're going to have these 2 characters, one of whom is a child of privilege and is kind of naive. He's well-meaning, he's very sweet, but he's coming at the world from a place of, I have everything and I can do anything. And this poor college student who is like a socialist activist and political science major with aspirations to try and change the world because she has nothing. And she's here on scholarship. But the 2 of them have a chemistry and they go out on a date to a frat party. And at this frat party, after kind of a kerfuffle involving one of Gwen's friends, her roommate, they wander off into the woods and they are attacked by a massive wolf. Let's throw to the clip.
From the darkness, a gray wolf pounces onto Larry, pinning him to the ground and scratching up his chest. Larry gets his forearm underneath the wolf's neck, keeping its teeth from his face. It's so heavy, this isn't a wrestling match he can win. Gwen punches the wolf in the head, and it rolls off of Larry and recovers its footing. Now it's after Gwen and lunges at her, scratching her arms as she tries to defend herself. Larry gets up and pulls a large monogrammed pocket knife from his jacket. He flips it open and tackles the wolf, stabbing it several times in the flank.
Thank you for remembering the clip.
So they are scratched. They are each bitten by this wolf, and then they are basically pulled into separate corners in their lives. And they don't meet again for a lot of the movie. Larry is sheltered in his sheltered life as a rich kid who lives in this big mansion with his staff and parents who want to protect him from the consequences of his actions. And Gwen is kind of left out in the cold and made the scapegoat of everything that's happening, these scandals around this mysterious death. But what's happening to both of them is they are developing these signs that they're going to wolf out at the next full moon. Now, the other big player here is a police detective named Martin Poole, played by John Bernthal.
Yeah.
And he's trying to kind of get to both of them so he can try and sort everything out, because it turns out, secretly, he is also a werewolf. In fact, much of this town of Talbot, California, named for the family that our werewolf is from and for the mining town that they built around themselves, a lot of people in this town are actually werewolves because they can work in this mercury mine. It's a union job, and they have good benefits, and they are not required to work at night. And it turns out they kind of been building this secret werewolf kind of community in their town. Now, so John Bernthal's character kind of wants to check in on them and make sure that they're safe, and also figure out what the hell happened that got one of their ranks to break from their usual shelter system that they have for themselves and go out and bite somebody, which doesn't usually happen very much because they are a community that supports each other during the full moon, so that they don't have a lot of werewolf incidents. Mm-hmm. Now, what ends up being the case is that Larry Talbot's parents own this mining company, and they're in with some real shady people that we will get to later. actually, might as well say it now. The Talbot Mining Company turned out to be kind of a subsidiary of Count Dracula's intercontinental conglomerate.
We introduced Dracula, yes.
Yes. Dracula makes his first appearance in the post-credits of this movie. And so the plan basically is they're worried that the reason why all of these werewolves are gathering at this Quicksilver mine is that, as established in The Mummy, mercury or Quicksilver is the actual thing that disrupts magical entities like mummies or vampires or werewolves and stuff like that. So this is a very powerful defense resource, and they think that the werewolves are going to try and take control of it.
You got 1 minute, my man.
It's okay. Turns out they weren't even thinking that, but this is all a labor bust designed to kind of splinter the werewolf community. Unfortunately, it kind of works, but what we end up with, once they learn about this, Gwen and Larry, despite their different upbringings and worldviews, kind of understand that they're being used as pawns in this larger game of capitalism. And they rebel against the system that they're in. They run off together. Martin Poole is unfortunately killed in the final squabble, technically by Larry when he gets turned into a werewolf. But we now have these two young werewolves who are like a will they, won't they relationship, who are on the run together, trying to find their own path without any of the baggage that they had in their previous lives. And they ride off into the sunset. I guess that's basically it.
8 seconds to go. Did you mention that Larry's mom gets turned into a vampire?
No, at the very end, in order to... Okay, there. Larry's mom gets turned into a vampire at the end as part of a business deal with Dracula in order to make sure that they get to continue to be part of the business.
Yeah, so top line things, we've got two. We got a wolf man, a wolf woman. One is a rich boy. One is a socialist girl. He was a punk. She did ballet. What more can I say?
Mm-hmm.
And the rich boy's mom is now working for Dracula, unbeknownst to our teen maybe lovers. Yeah, so we did like a teen action werewolf movie.
Yeah, and it has very much the structure of a superhero movie, and like they have the period of time where they're like learning their powers, and it's kind of cool. And admittedly, I never really quite get around to make being a werewolf like something to be afraid of that much.
We get to it eventually.
It's my early work, okay? I still like it.
Dylan has grown very much as a storyteller throughout this podcast.
Thank you, Dalton.
I'm very proud of Dylan.
Yeah, so Dalton, you arrived fully grown, and I don't get to take any credit.
No,
Dalton is a novelist and comics writer, and was before we started this show.
All right. Dylan has never been bad, but your pitches have gotten much more solid as we've gone.
Thank you, Dalton. I'll take it.
And diverse. So then it fell back to me to do The Invisible Man. And this was a lot of pressure because you may remember there was a very good Invisible Man movie that came out in 2020. That was a very scary and intense psychological horror movie. And now I had to reinvent it again just 2 years later. And so me being the horror person that I am and wanting to return the dark universe to the scary roots, I made it a slapstick comedy. The sort of general pitch being, what if you made a Mr. Bean movie where you couldn't see Mr. Bean?
Right. It's just antics happening around and to him, but he's not there.
So I guess let's put some time on the clock and I will recap this Invisible Man.
All right, 5 minutes, go.
We meet Jack Griffin, played by John C. Reilly, who works at he's a food chemist working on a new formula that he accidentally injects into his palm and it turns him invisible. Now, he is already an older gentleman who is divorced and feeling very lonely, and suddenly being literally invisible is not great for his self-esteem. But some local crooked cops discover him and his ailment and decide that they are going to use him to do a bunch of robberies around the town that they then frame on people they don't like. And so the Invisible Man starts going around town and robbing the enemies of these cops, including a very notable early scene in which he robs a judge and ends up spilling a bunch of like Gold Bond powder on his dick and balls and becoming a floating pair of genitals. And let's hear a clip of that. Jack reaches up and the key shudders as Jack's fingers graze it. As he strains, he bumps one of the lower shelves and a bottle of Gold Bond powder tips over. The cap pops off and covers Jack's invisible dick and balls with powder. Jack doesn't notice and finally gets the key. Meanwhile, the judge has noticed Jack's dewy footprints leading through the kitchen and follows them. His eyes widen as he sees a floating cock and balls emerge from the hallway and make its way through the kitchen, sliding past him and heading up the stairs. Upstairs, Jack finds the safe, opens it, and begins shoving all the jewelry in his mouth so it will be invisible when he leaves. When he gets back to the stairs, he sees the judge at the bottom, holding a cross and looking up at him.
Show yourself, ghost! I know you're there, taunting me with your pornographic visage.
Porno? Jack mumbles, then looks down and sees his junk. Oh, god damn it. He calls down to the judge, muffled and almost unintelligible because of all the jewelry in his mouth. Yes, 'tis I, the, porno ghost. So that was the basic tone of this film. This leads up to a plan to do a casino heist. This is in Portland, Oregon. They're doing a heist of a local casino that Jack will be in charge of. Meanwhile, on his trail has been a local ghost hunter named Carol Lemley, played by Darcy Carden, who has been investigating a series of reports of some sort of invisible abnormality around the town. So she follows him to the casino, and it turns out that this casino is run by vampires. And after a seemingly successful heist, as Jack and the cops are fleeing through the sewers underneath the casino, they are all killed by vampires except for Jack, and Jack runs into Nick Morton, played by Tom Cruise from The Mummy.
This was a big surprise that would have been unadvertised in the movie's marketing.
Yes, absolutely. It's a big twist that Tom Cruise is in this movie because he has hunted a bunch of vampires to this casino and is trying to get rid of them. So Nick Morton, Tom Cruise, The Mummy, enlists the help of Jack Griffin in trying to stop the vampires. Along the way, the vampires learn that if they take a blood transfusion from the Invisible Man, if they suck on his blood, they turn invisible and are then immune to sunlight. And so we get a big action sequence with an invisible vampire versus an invisible man with Tom Cruise caught in the middle. At the end of the day, they defeat the final vampire. Well, let's say Jack defeats the final vampire by pulling a wooden stake out of his asshole where it was concealed by his invisibility and plunging it through the vampire's chest. And after that, Carol and Nick and Jack decide to join forces to try to root out Dracula's legion of vampires. And that is where we end things.
Well done. You're much more concise at this than I am.
I'm trying to stick to just the broad strokes of things people will need to know going forward. And also Regina Hall makes an
Hall's
appearance.
in it.
And also there's a musical number.
Right. Our first but not our last musical number on the show.
So I don't know if this is still the case, but for a while we were saying if there's one episode of this podcast you listen to, make it that one. I do recommend.
It's so good.
Go back and listen to the Invisible Man one for a good time.
If this episode is making you at all curious, please check out the Invisible Man, and hopefully that will get you to listen to more of them. But it's so much fun. Maybe still my favorite episode of the show.
That same night that we taped The Invisible Man, we also recorded our final movie before our crossover, which is your take on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which was never, I don't know if it was announced as part of the original Universal Dark Universe slate.
But we kind of thought it was implied by their casting Russell Crowe.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, we're only getting like a Nick Fury-centered thing in the MCU now, like 12 years in, so who knows? But yes, I thought it would be cool to do a movie centered around my favorite part of The Mummy, which is Russell Crowe's version of Jekyll and Hyde.
Curiously enough, Universal had never done a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde adaptation in the classic era. I believe there's like a Paramount version, but not technically part of Universal's canon.
Right. So this would be the first one that was called Jekyll X Hyde. It was stylized with Jekyll and Hyde as like two intersecting the letter Y.
Check our Instagram.
Yeah. So here we go. 5 minutes on the clock. Let's see what I can do. This one might be shorter.
3, 2, 1.
So, the main character of Jekyll X Hyde is actually not Henry Jekyll for the most part. We are following a private detective who works for a law firm. Her name is Gabby Utterson, and she has kind of a dark past of her own, and she has a lot of hang-ups about trying to experience joy and self-acceptance in her life, the origins of which we learn over the course of the story, which I will just tell you now. She was a cop, but during the course of her time being a cop during 2020 in the height of like COVID and the George Floyd protests, she got talked into infiltrating and undermining like anti-fascist movements in order to incite violence and give the police an opportunity to just like...
And this is all saved as a reveal for later in the film.
Yes, but I'll just tell you that now so we have an idea who the character is. But she hates herself. And while she's working now, she's quit the force and she's working for a law firm along with her friend Teresa, who's a lawyer. She's played by Rachel Bloom. Oh, Gabby Utterson is played by Zoe Kravitz. Gabby takes on a case for the firm to investigate an alleged assault by one of their clients, Dr. Henry Jekyll, played by Russell Crowe, who seems like a really sweet guy and like a super smart scientist who would never harm anyone. But there's this footage of what looks like him trampling a child, like without really even giving a shit. So she has to look into it and see if their client's going to need legal help. And she investigates and she discovers Dr. Jekyll's dark secret, which is that he is sort of two guys. He takes this serum that keeps him as the kind and gentle Dr. Jekyll. But when it wears off, he reverts into this sort of grotesque, psychologically grotesque, and also bigger and stronger Eddie Hyde, who is sadistic and selfish and just like a real piece of shit. When she discovers about this serum that kind of changes the nature of him, Gabby becomes kind of fascinated, steals some for herself and uses it because she thinks she can use it to kind of separate the good part that she likes of herself from the bad part that she hates about herself. Now, what turns out to be the problem is that it doesn't work that way. What Jekyll's serum really does is it separates the fully demon part of him that he brought back from a near-death experience from the good parts of him. So Henry Jekyll and Edward Hyde really are two different entities right now. And one of them is probably a demon from hell or something like that. Now, Jekyll is still working at Prodigium during this time, but we've introduced a character to be above him in the organization or a partner in order to separate Prodigium from our characters to create a little bit more stakes. And this is where I use a character that Dalton introduced in Frankenstein, Indrid Cold, played by Cillian Murphy.
Because he's not a huge.
He's not really
thing
in Frankenstein,
that movie,
but he's a character from the Mothman mythology, and we have him as sort of the mysterious leader of Prodigium. And he's had enough of Dr. Jekyll's experiments on himself and bending the rules, and he's like, "All right, we're just gonna keep you confined from now on." This intersects with his sort of will they won't they or thing with Gabby. Gabby meets up with Dr. Halsey, who still works at Prodigium. I don't even know if we mentioned that Jennifer Halsey works at Prodigium. She works at Prodigium. So we end up with a final confrontation in which Gabby and Halsey basically break Jekyll and Hyde out of the custody of this shield-like organization, Prodigium. They escape. Hyde folds Indrid Cold into like a tiny ball and stuffs him into a drawer, which Cold weirdly survives because we don't know what his deal is, but apparently he can just put his skeleton back together.
He's got some kind of powers.
We have not and might never explain what his deal is because that's kind of cool. But they run off. Gabby decides that in order to find self-acceptance, she has to start changing how she lives, not just trying to bury the parts of herself she doesn't like. And she and Teresa quit the evil law firm they work for and start working as private investigators and lawyers together in private practice. And Jekyll/Hyde and Jennifer Halsey escape Prodigium and seek out Nick Morton and his new gang and join forces with Nick and Jack the Invisible Man and Carol Lemley, the paranormal investigator, to become an as yet unnamed team to continue to fight evil together.
That's right.
There we go.
And that tees us up for our crossover. Did you want to throw to a clip?
Oh, shit. Yes, I do. Here's the scene in which Jekyll kind of explains the deal with himself and the serum and kind of gets into the psychology of the film.
You could never understand. None of you could. The Gratium serum is not a vaccine or a chemotherapy keeping Hyde at bay. Without it, we are trapped together in agony. Gratium is a dividing agent, separating the evil in me into its own mind, its own person. But each consecutive dose only divides me further until whatever cartilage that holds the soul together is stretched taut and thin in all directions. I find myself unable to function. But after he's released and his rage has been sated, my mind is clear, my resolve is fortified. My heart is open and at peace, and the work thrives.
And innocent people die.
And I grieve for them, truly I do, but the fate of every soul in this world is at stake. My work.
Your work. No, I don't think that's what this is about at all. I think you'd accept any cost to create a version of yourself who you're willing to look in the eye.
Yes, I'm sure that's what you think, otherwise you wouldn't have taken the bloody serum yourself.
And we're back.
So that's Hyde's and Jekyll's whole deal. Is this making sense to anybody? Because I feel insane.
I don't think this episode is going to work.
I think we're going to release it. I think we have to release it. But we are going to press on despite being out of our minds.
Yeah,
we hope any of this is making sense.
I have mostly like sugar and caffeine running my body right now. And I feel like it's like, okay, go ahead and recap the last year of your life as concisely as possible.
Yes. I had a Kind bar and a bag of corn nuts, and that is what is fueling this Dark Universe recap.
Yes,
so thank you to the good people at Corn Nuts for providing the fuel that runs the Dark Universe.
Okay, so if all of this has sounded cool to you so far, and you're like, this sounds interesting, here's a point where you might want to pause the episode and just put on our 2-part crossover, The Dark Legion, House of Dracula. Because we are mimicking the structure of the Marvel Universe in that we have separated our show into phases, each phase capped off with a big crossover movie. And for these crossovers on our own show, one of the ways that we make it special is that, for one thing, the two of us write the episode together rather than pitching one to the other. And for another, we invite our friends to manage the big ensemble cast instead of just doing the voices back and forth at each other. Too many characters. That would be confusing.
Yeah.
We have asked our friends to, friends like Gita Jackson, Patrick Willems, Rachel Millman, Joe Stando, Dominic Griffin, and the rest. I don't want to name every person on the show.
But we love all of them equally. We're just crazy. I'm sorry.
Yes. We have them perform characters. So it is a full cast audio drama, kind of, that you will get to listen to. So if this sounds cool and you want to go for that, jump in right there at the Dark Legion. But if you don't feel like doing that right now, we're going to summarize it to you. Yes.
Here's what I've just decided we're going to do, because we both wrote this one together. I'm going to put 2.5 minutes on the clock, and you have to summarize it up to the point where
the clock runs out.
No, up to, I guess, yeah, just do it as far as you can.
Okay, and then you have to do the second half.
And then I'll pick it up from there.
Oh my God.
And we're going to see how that works.
Hopefully this is riveting radio for you all right now.
I'm sure it is. Are you ready to recap the first half of the Dark Legion House of Dracula?
Let's find out.
Here we go. 3, 2, 1.
Okay, so the Dark Legion House of Dracula opens with Dalton wrote this sort of opening prologue that is sort of a mini Dracula movie, where we find Jonathan Harker come to Castle Dracula to make a real estate deal with the mysterious and like fabulously wealthy guy that he theoretically doesn't know is a vampire. However,
in the present day.
In the present day. However, it turns out that it's not as it seems. Jonathan Harker is actually an alias for a vampire hunter named Abraham Van Helsing, and he's there to kill Dracula. However, Dracula is already aware of this, and this is a trap set for Van Helsing. So this whole section ends with Dracula luring Van Helsing down into the caves and the dungeons underneath his castle, where he already has kidnapped his wife, Mina. Dracula uses his powers of like creepy vampire magic to basically make Abraham Van Helsing and his wife Mina eat and fuck each other to death as a way to establish that Dracula is a bad, bad man.
Yep.
So now we rejoin our Dark Legion, although they haven't taken that name yet. All of our heroes many of the heroes from our previous films. We're talking about Nick Morton, the Mummy, played by Tom Cruise. The Invisible Man, Jack Griffin, played by John C. Reilly. We already said all of them. They've all gotten together except for including the Wolfmen now join in. We have the Wolfman and the Wolf Woman joining in, and Jekyll and Hyde. They all become a group to try and take on Dracula. In order to do this, they're trying to try and beat Dracula to getting these 2 artifacts called the Eyes of Osiris. Because if Dracula gets them, he will become the god of death with the ability to basically end death if he wants to. And we don't fully understand why he wants to do that yet, and we'll get to it. Over the course of this mission, everything goes terribly wrong. Hyde breaks loose of Jekyll and attacks one of them. They go on a mission where the Invisible Man is kidnapped by vampires who want to use his blood to become day-walking invisible monsters. And poor Chris Vale, Jake Johnson's character, is killed, and Nick Morton can't return him to life with his life and death powers because he's in too many pieces. Halfway point.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm going to pick up by mentioning that Frankenstein, by the way, is on the wrong team. He has been found by Dracula's people, and Dracula has promised him that he will return his bride to him in exchange for Frankenstein working for Dracula. And it is Victor Frankenstein who kills Chris Vale. So everything goes wrong. Things are really bad, but they find out where one of the eyes of Osiris is. It's in a prodigium facility, but also the vampires know that. And the vampires set upon it with an army of invisible vampires using Jack Griffin's blood, because again, he's been kidnapped by Dracula. And our Dark Legion goes there to stop the invisible vampires and get the hook of Osiris first. During this battle, Henry Jekyll dies. He sacrifices himself to save his teammates and is killed. And it's very sad. And then in the wake of this battle, they decide to take the fight to Castle Dracula. They go there. A lot of shit happens once they're there.
Everyone has their own little fight scene.
Everyone has their own little fight scenes. Jack gets rescued. Larry's mom shows up. Remember, she was a vampire at the end of The Wolfman, and she tries to kill Gwen, but Frankenstein stops her. He switches over to the good guys and kills Larry's mom.
However, crucially, Larry does not have it in him to fight his own mother to save Gwen. And so because he doesn't save her, they have a big fight.
Yes, and then they all go down into Dracula's dungeon, and they have a big warring fight scene with all of Dracula's forces that basically, a lot of details aside that I won't get into, it climaxes with Nick Morton using his power to restore people to life, to restore Dracula's life to him. And here's a clip of that happening. He stretches his palms towards Dracula, and Dracula recoils. Nick speaks in a booming, demonic voice.
Your centuries are up, Dracula. 100 lifetimes spent killing from the shadows because you fear the darkness. Well, we are the darkness. We are Legion, and there will be no more hiding from us.
Dracula cowers, weak to this magic.
No, I won't go back there. I won't cross that threshold again.
Not today. Today, we give you a gift. The gift of life.
Bandages unspool from Nick's wrists and begin to wrap themselves around Dracula, slowly mummifying him.
No, not that! You don't know what you're doing. It's coming for all of us, sooner or later, even yourself. Together we could defeat death for good. You'll regret this. You'll come crawling back to me!
The bandages wrap around his mouth, silencing him. A blinding yellow light comes from under the bandages, and then they dissolve. Dracula sits up and looks at himself. He's less pale, with color in his cheeks. His fangs are gone. He's human. And so, our Dracula has now been made mortal, and that is how the Dark Legion leaves him. They leave, and they're all miserable because everything has gone wrong. But throughout the course of this, Carol Lemley, our ghost hunter, played by Darcy Carden, has fallen in love with Jennifer Halsey, and they go off together. They are a thing now. And everybody goes their separate ways. Gwen and Larry have broken up because Larry did not save Gwen. Everyone's miserable and on their own, and that's basically where we leave it.
They pick a name for the team and then break up. They're called the Dark Legion.
Nick Morton picks the name after everyone has left. The end.
Oh, God.
We have made it.
That's
through
the end of phase one. Oh, boy.
So now we have even more movies to discuss.
More movies, and they're all longer.
You know what? It's only been 45 minutes. We are on track. And we are going to keep those longer movies to the broad strokes. They mostly got longer because we started writing them more as screenplays.
Right. We got much more
pitches.
detail into what's happening with them.
So we are going to take a quick break. We're going to get very zen. We're going to meditate. We're going to take some deep breaths.
I'm going to drink the rest of the soda.
No,
freak the fuck out.
Fuck. No, we're calming down. We're calming down and we're talking slower when we come back.
This is the most animated I've ever been on the show.
So please stick with us. We've got a lot more cool shit coming. We will see you on the other side of this break.
I'm Tom Zalatnal.
And I'm Teffer Adjemian.
And we're the hosts of the No Bad Food podcast.
No Bad Food is a show about great food and the people who love to make and eat it. Our mandate is simple: to explore, taste, and learn about food in ways that celebrate all the things that make it great.
Every week we dig into a different dish, meal, ingredient, cuisine, or piece of food media, exploring the history and culture around it, sharing favorite recipes, and learning from our wonderful guests.
The only rule?
You gotta love it.
After all, there's no such thing as bad food.
Find us in the Pod Cavern or wherever fine podcasts are sold.
Welcome back to our recap episode where we are trying our best to summarize an entire universe of films for you and saving. It may be crazy, but it's not 30 hours long. So
No.
You have to pick your poison. You can get the good version that makes sense, but takes 30 hours, or you can get us breathlessly shouting names at you for 90 minutes. Make your choice.
All right, and with that, we're going to jump into the first installment in our second phase of the Dark Universe. Dalton, you put it upon yourself to do a sequel to the 2017 Mummy that ended up being much larger, ended up being a sequel to a great many things.
So it was sequel time, baby. We had established all our characters. It was time to put some number twos at the end. And so the biggest one was The Mummy, right? Because I had to make a sequel to a movie that actually exists and is bad. So I had to make a movie that followed up on the events of the first, but also try to make it good. And this fell to me because I had brought back Nick Morton in The Invisible Man, and I had been in charge of a lot of his arc for Dark Legion, like the general arc, I think. And so he kind of felt like my character out of our character split.
You rehabilitated him. I didn't give a shit about Nick until you reintroduced him in The Invisible Man. And then through Dark Legion, you really made him a character that I liked. And I'm glad that you carried him forward.
I tried to make him interesting. So I made a movie called The Mummy Returns, which may sound familiar to those of you who like the good Universal monster movies. Let's hit the clock and let's see what I can do.
Ready, go.
So basically, I'm going to keep it 100 and keep it very sparse. Nick wants to cure himself because Set, remember, we said we'd say that name a lot, the god of death has cursed him, and it's starting to control him more and more. Set is angry with Nick because of the events of the Dark Legion that I won't go into, and it's slowly killing him. And every time he uses his powers, he gets hurt more, and it's eventually going to kill him. So he really needs to find a way to get Set out of him. So he's following a bunch of clues that lead him to a big hole in the ground in Sudan.
Yes.
Okay. A big hole in the ground that is supposed to lead to some ruins that will help him. He falls in there because some people are trying to kill him, and he ends up deep underground in a network of caves that were not built to be traversed by a person, and he doesn't have any of his powers down there. And what proceeds is a very claustrophobic sequence, kind of like The Descent, if you've seen that film, where Nick is trying to survive in a cave system by squeezing his way through very claustrophobic tunnels, and it's a big claustrophobia nightmare. Eventually, he gets stuck, and he thinks he is going to die, or maybe just live forever. He doesn't know if he can die, but just be stuck down there, when suddenly a hand comes out of nowhere and pulls him to safety. Who does that hand belong to? Rick O'Connell, a.k.a. Brendan Fraser from the 1999 Mummy film, who there is a long convoluted backstory about how he's still alive 60 years later, and I'm not going to recap it. You can go listen to that episode if you want all the details, but I made it make sense. He is stuck underground, and he is alive because he needs to stop Imhotep from ever coming back to Earth.
Imhotep is the mummy from the original Mummy and the 99 Mummies, for those who don't know.
Yes. But it turns out Imhotep is also the only person who knows how to cure Nick of Set, because Imhotep is the one who sealed Set away back in the day. So Nick needs to revive Imhotep, and Rick needs to stop him. And they sort of form an uneasy alliance with different goals, and they bicker a little bit. And here's a little clip where they argue about whether or not Nick Morton actually qualifies as a mummy.
Yeah, you're telling me you had an immortal undead brute, 2 werewolves, and a handful of monster fighting experts on your team. So what exactly was your role there? I mean, I get it. You can bring people back from the dead, but they don't usually make the medic team leader.
I'm not just the medic. I'm sort of the team's resident mummy. Rick looks at him skeptically.
You're a mummy?
Yeah, that's right. Cursed by Set himself.
Have you ever been mummified?
No, but there was this ceremonial dagger.
You're not a mummy.
Okay, wait.
You're possessed. You're not a mummy. Because first of all, if you were really a mummy, I'd have to kill you. That's just what I do. So don't go claiming you're a mummy just because you have bandage powers.
It's a shorthand. there's no specific term for someone with an ancient Egyptian curse on them who hasn't been mummified.
Accuracy is important, is all I'm saying.
So they venture underground to the Golden Pyramid of Amsher, which, if you've seen The Mummy Returns from 2001, is the pyramid from that movie, which is now underground. And they venture through it and resurrect Imhotep. And I've skipped over an important part. They do get Set out of Nick Morton. He is cured. They have to mummify him. They have to like pull it out through his nose, like, the brains, and they have to pull his organs out and stuff. But Nick Morton is cured of Set by the end. And him and Rick escape to the surface, thinking that they have sealed Imhotep back away. What Rick has not realized is that Imhotep has taken the form of Nick. And Imhotep/Nick kills Rick O'Connell. That's right, Brendan Fraser is now dead. I made him canon just to kill him and in the very last scene of the movie. And our actual Tom Cruise, Nick Morton, is buried underground in the ruins of the Pyramid of Amsher, and that's where I fucking left him. He is trapped in a sarcophagus buried under miles of rock with nobody knowing he's down there because Imhotep looks like him on the surface.
Meanwhile, we also reveal that our new couple from the Dark Legion, Dr. Jennifer Halsey and paranormal investigator Carol Lemley, are now engaged.
Yes.
And Nick Morton has an invitation to the wedding, and Imhotep has accepted.
Yes, that is going to be very important for the Dark Legion too, that those two are getting married. Nick is not around, but someone with Nick's face will be attending.
Once again, you've gotten it done in another 5 minutes.
Hell yeah.
Yes, so one of the things that we have going on throughout phase 2 is the gradual build up to the wedding of the century between our two favorite characters, one of whom is a rehab job from the Mummy and the other whom is an invention of Dalton's.
And neither of whom are monsters or have any powers of any kind.
They are our two normal humans.
Yeah.
And they are adorable together.
They're super cute. They have so many fun scenes in phase 2. You can hear Jenny Halsey in The Mummy Returns. You can hear both of them together a lot in Phantom of the Opera.
We'll get to that shortly.
Yeah.
So Dalton decided that they were going to add 3 movies to our continuity retroactively.
That's
The Mummy,
right,
The Mummy Returns, and Tomb of the Dragon Emperor.
Tomb of the Dragon Emperor does fit, even though I don't really reference it in my film.
And if we feel like casting Michelle Yeoh in something, we'll just do it. We don't care that.
No, not allowed. Not allowed.
Fine. Well, I guess I'm going to have to watch fucking Tomb of the Dragon Emperor then, so I can find out what her character's deal is, so I can bring her back and Michelle Yeoh can be in our universe.
Yeah.
If she's free, she's pretty busy right now. Okay, so following The Mummy Returns, I got to do a sequel to one of my own scripts, but rather than doing something called like The Wolfman 2 or The Wolfmen or whatever, I borrowed and repurposed the title and somewhat of the premise of an even older Universal monster movie about werewolves. That's, I believe, a 1935 movie called Werewolf of London. My movie is called Werewolves of London.
Because we've already established there's a shitload of them.
We got a bunch of werewolves.
Yeah.
All right, so hit that button. Let's go. 5 minutes.
3, 2, 1.
So Wolfman is actually more the story of Gwen than it is about Larry, and kind of going through her experience of finding out what it means to be a werewolf and kind of taking control of her life. This one really belongs more to Larry. So Larry is on the run. He ran off at the end of the Dark Legion. His mother was a vampire and then got killed. He's separated from his father and his fortune because they're in league with Dracula. He doesn't trust them. So he's been wandering around Europe since the end of the last movie and ends up back in London where his mother is from and just shacks up with his uncle. Kind of just trying to put his life together. Now, while he's there in London, he ends up being discovered by a group of werewolves in London who are a gang called the Brixton Bloodhounds. The Brixton Bloodhounds are an adorable group of very English werewolves who are also kind of a weird polycule.
Yeah, very horny.
Yes.
Very horny little group of wolves.
And so they want to recruit Larry to help them to catch a scientist who they believe has the key to controlling werewolf breakouts, either giving them the ability to do it at will or to suppress it during a full moon, basically getting control of their bodies and their forms. They want to get this scientist under their control. So they recruit Larry on a mission to kidnap him. Now, when they do try their mission to kidnap this scientist, turns out the scientist is a bodyguard, and that bodyguard is Gwen Conliffe. And we see the story from her perspective. She's back in the States, living on in the First Nations reservation that her family is from, hiding from the cops because she's wanted for a murder from the first movie. But she gets dragged into it because she too has an investment in trying to control like the destiny of werewolves, trying to, in the power vacuum left by Dracula, now werewolves have the ability to control the resources that make them werewolves or keep them safe from being killed by vampires or people or whatever. So they end up joining forces to try and get this scientist the tools that he needs to create what could be a cure for being a werewolf or a trigger to become a werewolf and weaponize it on their own terms. So the Brixton Bloodhounds, Larry, Gwen, the scientist whose name I don't remember right now, but it's not important probably. They travel into the Scottish Highlands in search of this flower that they can use to create their serums that they'll need for going forward in their werewolf lives. They are confronted there by who else but Larry's dad, John Talbot, who is no longer part of the Dracula organization, but who does still have a vested interest in this resource and in trying to get his son back and get a little bit of revenge on the people he blames for the death of his wife, including Gwen. Now, Larry has always been kind of hurt by the idea that being a werewolf sucks for him because he used to have everything when he was a rich kid. And now he's had to have a little bit of a taste with what it's like to live more closer to a normal life than he used to have because he's no longer incredibly privileged and he has to kind of struggle through life. But through his camaraderie with the Brixton Bloodhounds and through his on-again, off-again thing with Gwen, he kind of has to struggle with maybe he does not want his old life back. And he has to rebel against his father. Now, we have some of his relationship with Gwen. They talk through a little bit of their conflict on a long car ride together to the Scottish Highlands, which I'd like to throw to now. Here's the clip.
Oh, why would this be weird? Because we were sleeping together for like 6 months and then you just stood there while your mom tried to murder me?
Because of that, yeah. Mostly.
Yeah, it's a little awkward.
I'm so sorry about that, Gwen. It was a really awful situation, but I should have had your back.
I appreciate you saying that.
I've had a lot of time alone to reflect. I was confused and terrified, but I was also selfish. I wasn't just choosing my mom over you, I was choosing myself over you. The idea that I could just erase everything that happened since we met and go back to being a sheltered rich kid. Even if that was possible, the idea that it would cost you your life should have made it an easy no. I'm so angry at myself for even hesitating.
Larry has finished his speech. He waits a few seconds, anticipating a response. And when he doesn't get one...
And how about you?
What about me?
Do you have anything you want to say to me, maybe?
Such as?
Such as, sorry I abandoned you in a strange country right after your mom died?
Gwen says nothing.
Unfucking believable.
So ultimately, once they're confronted by his father, Larry decides that he's going to side with his fellow werewolves and resist against his father's control, forsake his inheritance, and allow werewolves to control their own destiny. Kind of moved by this, there ends up being like a big fight with an out-of-control werewolf, and Larry's father sacrifices himself in order to save his son. And Gwen and Larry have made up. They are now on the same side of the sort of ideological battle about what's happening, and they're not back together as a couple, but they're getting along again, and they've decided that they're gonna hang out at Carol and Jenny's wedding.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Larry decides to stay in London, hang out with the Brixton Bloodhounds, and spend some time getting to know his uncle, who has lost the rest of his family to this whole debacle. So we leave Larry in London. Gwen goes back to the States, but everyone's kind of getting along now, and werewolves potentially will have the ability to control their outbreaks in the future.
Boom. Pretty much exactly 5 minutes.
Whee!
Yeah, the important stuff, that they have repaired their relationship a little bit. They're not dating, but they're on good terms.
Right.
They are both going to the wedding, and we've got a whole bunch of more werewolves that could possibly show up at any point.
Yeah, and as we're recording this, we have not figured out the story to the Dark Legion 2 yet. We don't know if the Brixton Bloodhounds are in it.
Maybe they're crucial. Maybe
the whole movie's about them. We don't know.
Maybe we just kill off the Dark Legion in the opening scene and make it a Brixton Bloodhounds movie.
People will love it.
Yeah, people would.
Yes, so the Wolfman movies have been an opportunity to kind of play with the almost all of my stories are about class in one way or another. Although I've been getting better about that. My last 2 have been about things aside from class.
Yeah, they absolutely have been.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what's going on with our werewolves who haven't been seen since. So that's where we've left them.
Then we both got to introduce some new monsters to the canon by adding new franchises, starting with The Creature from the Black Lagoon, which I did as a mostly completely standalone story. I didn't tie it in with the rest of our universe except for a little bit at the end, which I'll probably get to. But I just wanted to tell a complete reinvention of The Creature from the Black Lagoon. And I personally think that's my best pitch.
I really like it.
It's my favorite. I'm turning it into a screenplay, so I hope other people like it. Who knows?
All right. You'll have 5 minutes to tell everybody about it starting now.
So what I'm going to do for this one, because it's so isolated, is I'm going to focus more on the mechanics of the Black Lagoon instead of giving a full plot recap, because the plot of this story, being a standalone film, is not really going to affect the Dark Legion 2 probably too much. But my Black Lagoon follows a young girl named Margarita Marin, aka Rita, who's a 12-year-old girl living in a conservative town in Florida. Her and her mother are undocumented and, you know, sort of looked at askance by the very white local residents. And one day Rita is running away from home and she stumbles upon a vast black lagoon in the middle of the woods in the middle of the night. And this is a sort of mystical realm. In the daytime, it's not there. She goes there in the day and it's just regular forest. But at night she goes and it is a crystal clear black lagoon where if you go under, you can breathe underwater. It has some weird sort of mirror-ish properties. And in the middle of the lagoon, under the water, is an island with a cave that is glowing with light. And inside that cave is a tunnel that leads straight to hell. And basically, the idea is that this is an area where the veil between life and death is very thin, and those who are close to death can access it. And the creature is the ferryman. He is there to escort you from the land of the living down into the cave to your afterlife.
Sometimes in very spooky, violent, and bloody ways.
Yes, absolutely. But Rita's a little different. Him and Rita sort of develop a strange bond, and it seems like the creature wants her to stay with him and help him in the Black Lagoon permanently. And they have this beautiful little dance together, inspired by the original Creature from the Black Lagoon movie, that I would like to play a clip for you now. She swims out deeper, just under the surface of the water, and just above her, like a reflection on the other side, the creature swims in sync. She catches a glimpse of him over her shoulder and she recoils. He comes to a stop with her. They stare at each other from opposite sides of the surface, bringing their faces up to each other. Rita is awestruck by the majesty of the grotesque, surly beast. She reaches her small hand up to the surface and is matched by his large, webbed one. But before they can touch, the creature swims away, towards the center of the lagoon. Rita gives chase, and the two of them swim together, reflections of each other, in a beautiful underwater dance, separated by the lagoon's surface. Rita is ecstatic, swimming effortlessly with joy and confidence. She closes her eyes for a moment, and when she opens them, the creature is gone. And so, over time, though, Rita becomes scared of the creature because she doesn't want to stay with him. Meanwhile, on the surface, we meet a man named Nestor, who seems to be guarding the area where the lagoon should be. It turns out that's sort of his job, is wherever the Black Lagoon appears, because it appears in different locations all over the world, Nestor follows it, because in the middle of whatever clearing it has chosen, there is a little sack of eggs. And if that sack is destroyed, the creature is loosed upon our world. And he tells all of this to Rita, and in the middle of the night, he is killed by a bunch of rednecks. And those rednecks go and they destroy that little sack, and the creature comes to our world and starts wreaking havoc, and is about to kill Rita's mom when Rita says, "No, I will go with you." Goes with him back to the Black Lagoon, but ends up escaping and becoming the new Nestor, basically the new keeper of the Black Lagoon. A very important part of this whole story, and what the story really hinges upon, is that Rita is having some gender feelings, and she has hit puberty and is not having a good time. And not only is she undocumented and maybe queer, but she doesn't really have the vocabulary for that. She's just like, I am depressed and I don't like my body and things are bad, which is why she can go to the Black Lagoon, because
the Black Lagoon
a dangerous place to be.
Yes, if you are already in a precarious position
yes.
in your life and you are teetering on the edge between life and death, the lagoon may appear to you.
Yes, and being a young child in a restrictive place, dealing with a lot of feelings, kids like that don't always live, unfortunately. And that is sort of the emotional crux of it. So at the end, she leaves her mother, who has not been super supportive of her. She cuts her hair, changes her name to Hunter, has maybe changed her pronouns since then, although that's not made super explicit in the film itself. And you find out at the end that this job of keeping the Black Lagoon is a job under the Prodigium umbrella. And so Hunter is now working for Prodigium as the person that follows the Black Lagoon around. And seems like, for our universe's purposes, this lagoon is kind of a back door into hell.
Which is why in the post-credits...
That's right, we see Nick Morton enter the Black Lagoon. He opens the sarcophagus and swims to the surface, sees the island, and that is the last we've seen of him.
What does this mean exactly? We don't know. But that's a question we will almost definitely answer in the Dark Legion 2.
That's right. That's what you need to know.
All right.
About the creature.
10 seconds on the clock still left. Good job.
Whew. We're getting there.
We are. Okay. We're powering through.
Tired.
We are both
I need a second wind.
We're both so tired.
We each have one movie left.
Okay.
No, you have to do you have two movies left.
I have two movies left. You have one left. Okay. All right. I'm going to dive right into this. You got to start the clock, though, because
yes.
I don't want to be in charge of it.
You're going straight into it?
Let's go.
3, 2, 1.
My Phantom of the Opera is a musical. I wrote 3.5 original songs for it. I didn't tell Dalton until we started playing.
Surprise.
I surprised everybody with the fact that I had written and recorded songs with a couple of cast members. And so that's ripping that Band-Aid right off. It's a musical. Sorry, spoiled it forever.
Yes.
Okay, but our Phantom of the Opera actually is a movie about Jenny and Carol. They're getting ready for their wedding, but their relationship is starting to hit its first rough patch because they met in the midst of a big, crazy horror movie. For Jennifer Halsey, that was Tuesday. She's been doing this her whole life. She has been with Prodigium, and now this romance with Carol is her chance to be just a regular gal and live a regular life and get married and have a happily ever after. For Carol, a paranormal investigator who never found jack shit until The Invisible Man, now she's finally started the life that she wants. And this whole settling down thing with Jenny is kind of the opposite of what she thought her life was going to be like when she, in her words, made a home with Miss Indiana Jones. Now, an opportunity for Carol to recapture the excitement of when she first met Jenny rears its head when there appears to be a deadly haunting of Broadway at the Majestic Theater in New York, where is housing the final performances of The Phantom of the Opera on Broadway, which did in fact come to an end in April of this year when the episode aired.
Yes.
So they fly off to New York. Carol's super excited to meet her first ghost and to solve its problems, finish its unfinished business, and save Broadway. Jennifer Halsey has, in all of her supernatural adventures, never encountered anything that would make her believe that ghosts, in this sort of traditional Hollywood sense, are real. There are evil gods. There are vampires and werewolves, things with life and death. But the idea of somebody is unhappy that their play didn't get produced and is taking over the Majestic Theater, that's not real. However, all evidence seems to indicate that the Majestic Theater is being haunted by a woman named Erica Lawrence, who was a playwright, musical director on Broadway, who was about to get her big break. And then all of her support system, all of these investors pulled out. And then she was in a horrible car accident on her way back to the suburbs. And now 10 years later, she's haunting the Majestic Theater saying, "Put on my play or I'll kill everyone." Carol is kind of sympathetic to this because she thinks this is all kind of cool. And she's also dealing with a sort of sexual hang-up in that she's into bondage and S&M. Halsey is not really. She's kind of a rookie she's kind of vanilla and she's kind of struggling to figure out what they want. And the Phantom is the seductive figure who chains up Carol underneath the theater and shows her the night of her life. So it's getting very weird and confusing for her. So she briefly is kind of on the Phantom's side because this becomes a big erotic adventure for her. Halsey, however, is convinced this is not a fucking ghost because that's not how this works. And she does this investigation. And she discovers that the Phantom of the Opera is, in fact, Erica's older sister, tech genius Claudia Lawrence, who has been posing as a ghost in order to enact a complicated revenge scheme on all the investors who pumped up the ego of her sister, made it seem like she was going to have her big break, had her put all of her eggs in this one basket, and then the fucking floor drops out on her, and it ends her life. So, Claudia's plan is to lure all of the elite of Broadway into one night show of this dead woman's musical, live stream it for everyone to see so everyone becomes aware of her work, and then blow up the theater with everyone from Lin-Manuel Miranda to Padma Lakshmi locked inside. Now, there's also a musical number happening here, so let's have a little section here. We're going to cut to a clip where Claudia, although I think at this point we don't know it's Claudia, explains her intentions through song. This performance is done by my friend Izzy Hodnett.
And don't you deserve someone who would kill for you?
Yes.
Louder.
Yes.
Louder.
Yes.
I want my name above the title of a Broadway smash. I want the glory and the laurels, and I want it to last. I want this whole fucking city reduced to ash. And in a flash, I'm in the very last original cast. I should have been Anais Mitchell, should have been the next big thing. I'm like Lin-Manuel Miranda, except I can actually sing. I've been buried 6 feet under, I'm finally free. I can touch you, but you can't touch me. Can't touch me.
All right, you got 45 seconds.
Okay, the plot is foiled. They managed to stop the Phantom, Claudia, from destroying this entire block of Broadway. However, they do still blow up the Majestic Theater and drop a chandelier on her, just like in the musical. Claudia, however, survives, burned everywhere on her face except for where the classic half mask of the Phantom of the Opera is. Meanwhile, Jenny and Carol have used this incident to kind of repair their sexual hangups. Their bond is stronger than ever, and they're so excited to get married. Also, the Invisible Man is in this movie. I didn't talk about it. He's been really depressed. He was hanging on Broadway in order to try to make himself feel better, and now he feels a little bit better, and he's probably coming to the wedding. Woo!
Just barely made it. I was wondering, we got to the end, I was like, wait, did you mention that Jack Griffin is a major character in this movie?
I had this is secretly a sequel to The Invisible Man, just like The Invisible Man secretly had Nick Morton in it. I decided to secretly put The Invisible Man in my Phantom movie. I didn't tell, it's a mid-movie twist.
Yeah.
But we find out what he's been up to since he was tortured in the Dark Legion. We are now going over the 5 minutes. But
yeah. But he's doing better now.
He works through some of his baggage through helping Jenny and Carol through their problem. He's still reclusive, which is easy to do when you're invisible. But,
I'm betting, though, we may see him at the wedding.
Well, we'll hear him.
Yes. Probably. Unless he wears a suit.
Who knows?
In which case we will see his clothes.
Okay, that's the Phantom of the Opera. That's another fun one. I would love to check it out. I wrote a bunch of songs, and I'm pretty happy with it.
We have a musical episode of this podcast, and it is worth listening to.
Okay, after that, Dalton did their third and solo installment of Phase 2, which was
The Bride and Frankenstein.
What? We did another curveball where the movie was not exactly what people expected.
Yes.
Do you want to set it up or dive right in?
I'm just going to say that I had felt like I had put my stamp on Frankenstein all the way back at the beginning of this episode with that 1830s Frankenstein movie, and I wanted to do something completely different. And here is what I did.
Bing!
It's a slasher movie. For the first chunk of it, you don't even see Frankenstein at all. The basic premise is that there is a person named Cassie Falk. Cassie Falk, who is a little person, by the way, who is getting married. And her husband, played by Domhnall Gleeson, don't have any money. So they go to get married in the Swiss Alps where Cassie's family lives because they are circus folk. And they are one of the oldest circus families in Europe, and they own this big ski resort. And Cassie, as a young person, was like, fuck this. I am not a circus person. I am not a freak. I am a human, and I'm going to go live my life. And so she resents going back and being around her family. While they're at the ski resort and sort of meeting the fam, someone starts trying to kill them. And while someone starts trying to kill them in true slasher movie style, suddenly Victor Frankenstein shows up in the middle of it because he was just passing through and starts helping them. But of course, it is a slasher movie and everyone needs to die except the final girl. And so things proceed until only Cassie and Victor are left standing. Almost. It turns out that the killers were Cassie's father and her thought dead sister, who is a giant named...
You're on your own on this one.
Elsa Falk, played by Gwendolyn Christie. And Frankenstein and Cassie end up killing her dad, but Elsa Falk, the giant, is still after them. And they retreat to Castle Frankenstein because it turns out this ski lodge was built on the same site where Castle Frankenstein once stood, although now it's kind of a burned out husk, which is why Victor was there in the first place, because he is there to grab a keepsake from his time when he was alive to give to Gwen, a little wolf carving. And this will probably come up in the Dark Legion too. He has recovered a wolf carving that he made back in the 1830s for his daughter because he now wants to give it to Gwen as thanks for being his friend. Elsa follows them there, and a big battle ensues on the roof of the castle where Frankenstein was born, and they end up killing her by electrifying her via wedding ring. And here is a clip of that climactic moment. Victor looks up and sees lightning flashing in the clouds above them. He gets up and hurries to the loose grounding wire. He fiddles with something and then yells, "To me, Cassie!" Cassie darts between Elsa's legs towards Victor. Elsa turns and finds herself face to face with Frankenstein. He grabs her wrist and pulls out the wedding ring, which he has wrapped the grounding cable around. He slips it on her finger and pushes her backwards, just as lightning strikes the rod, energy sparking its way down the line and into her hand, electrocuting her so badly that seams of her flesh instantly burn and tear open. She seizes up and falls backwards onto the remains of the stone slab, her eyes wide open and frozen. From her POV, we see Cassie standing tall over her, just before she drives the sword deep into her chest, pinning her to the slab. So at the end of the movie, Victor and Cassie are the only two left standing, and Cassie wants some company because her fiance and friends and family have just died. So she asks Victor to accompany her back home to the States. Meanwhile, Elsa, thought dead on the roof, gets struck by lightning, and of course, her eyes open, and she's got a streak of white in her hair. And technically, because of the ring on her finger, she is the bride of Frankenstein. And then Victor RSVPs to Carol and Jenny's wedding with a +1. He is bringing Cassie along. And that's really all you need to know.
Yeah, you did that in about 3 minutes. Well, because almost all the other characters who are in that movie die. So yeah, it's not like you have to explain all their deals.
I'm really proud of that pitch. If you like the idea of a slasher movie with a Frankenstein in it, please listen to it. A lot of cool shit happens. There's some gnarly deaths. But the big thing is, Victor maybe has a girlfriend now? And also there is an undead giant that wants revenge somewhere out there in the world.
All right, one more, which we recorded earlier today. So this ought to be fresh in my mind. Okay, so after all of these, we still had not actually done a movie that was just entirely Dracula-centric.
Wait. Pause. Time out. Interlude. We have to talk about one other canon element.
Oh, do we have to talk about the Dark Universe Omnibus?
I feel like it should get a brief mention. I just want to say, before we wrap up all of our recaps, in between all of these things in Phase 2, we've been having guests on, and our guests have been pitching movies and remakes and also things like wrestling crossovers and fan fiction and a video game. And some of those things we sort of made canon. You can listen to Merritt Kay's pitch on the Black Cat, which we have sort of decided to integrate. But the first pitch we ever got is from a good friend, Giovanni Colantonio, who is a video games journalist, who pitched us a video game version that introduced a character who I don't think we named in that episode, but will be important in Dracula Lives, who is a descendant of the Van Helsing family. Because remember, we killed Abraham Van Helsing in our
in the first
Dark
5
Legion.
minutes of the Dark Legion.
Introduced him and immediately killed him, which is not a great idea when you're building a universe around these characters. You should probably have a Van Helsing in the mix.
So what Geo did was pitch a video game that was sort of an anthology of narrative stories, each of them set in a different era and around a sort of different subgenre of horror. And what we decided over the course of that pitch is that each of those stories was the central character of it, like sort of the player character, is actually a member of the Van Helsing line of this legacy of monster hunters.
Yeah.
But by the time of our present, they're all dead, except for one who's played by Micah Monroe, who I would later name Adelaide Van Helsing.
Yes.
I think that's a cool name.
She's sort of the framing device of the video game, where you sort of play as her at the beginning and end. And then the stories you play in the middle are sort of her doing research on her family and learning about what happened to them.
So when we took that idea, it was sort of apocrypha and from that. But then I ended up incorporating some of it into Dracula Lives. So I think we can solidly refer to it now as canon.
Yes, and all the guest pitches have been fun. They are all sort of dubiously canon. I recommend you go listen to them.
Back in the heyday of the old Star Wars expanded universe, there was this letter grade of canon where there's like G canon, C canon, B canon, or whatever. We're gonna do that.
Yeah, but the WrestleMania crossover is a canon.
We did specifically say that one is just completely it happened, but it's not going to matter for this. There's an episode where the Invisible Man wrestles two WWE superstars, and it's cool. It's probably
fun.
not relevant to this conversation. The Miz is not invited to the wedding. Wait, maybe the Miz should be invited to the wedding.
Should be at the wedding.
Doesn't matter.
So it's a good thing we mentioned it, because there might be some wrestlers at this wedding, and now you'll know why.
Okay, now Dracula Lives.
Dracula Lives.
All right, start the clock.
Woo! 3, 2, 1.
Dracula Lives is a 5-act odyssey that has Dracula picks up where Dracula left off in House of Dracula. He's been turned back into a human being, and he hates it. So he's on a quest to regain his immortality and, if possible, get the power over life and death that he was after in the first place. However, there are a lot of obstacles to this because he's now a mortal man and everybody wants to kill him because he's extremely evil and has a legacy of death that he's left behind over the course of 600 years. So his last remaining human familiar, Renfield, tries to poison him. Dracula manages to kill him, but he's very, very weakened. Then he takes a train to try and go and find someone who can help him. And on that train, Adelaide Van Helsing goes full slasher mode and tries to derail the entire train, if that's what it takes to kill Dracula, forcing Dracula to become a hero for 5 minutes and save the train in order to save his own life.
Yeah.
But Adelaide survives and is carted off, and she has sworn revenge. Then he meets with his old magic tutor, who helps him to get in touch with the god or demon Pazuzu from The Exorcist, who restores his body to its full strength, but he's still not a vampire.
Yes, The Exorcist is now canon.
It's now canon because Universal paid something like $6 million or something. No, $6 million is probably a low number. Paid a lot of money to license 3 new Exorcist movies, which will be directed by David Gordon Green. That's his new post-Halloween project. Dracula fights his old brother vampire and finds the location of the vampire who initially turned him into a vampire, who we call the Master, played by Charles Dance, as he was in Dracula Untold, which is still not canon. Dracula climbs up a mountain where he seems to be going crazy and losing all kinds of his sense of his grip on reality. When he reaches the top of the mountain, he tries to get the Master to turn him back into a vampire so that he can fight against the forces of death and prevent this coming apocalypse, this vaguely defined, that we're still keeping some of this mysterious here about the nature of the threat, but something bad is coming.
Yes.
That Dracula fears that even as an immortal will not spare him from the fires of hell. And he wants his immortality back, and he wants the power to fight against death. But the Master basically says, it's too late, jackass.
You fucked up.
You fucked up.
You
now
carked it.
Hell's a-coming, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that movie ends with Dracula looking through death's door at something we don't see that horrifies him so much that he seems to lose his mind, and we watch his skin blister from the fires of hell, probably. And that's where we leave it. because it's a full-on horror movie and it's a bad ending.
That was
and
the easiest one to summarize
it
of
was,
all
but-
your movies.
Well, because all of these little stories and most of them don't add up to things that we need. A lot of people in that story die as well. Like we meet his old magic tutor slash, kind of fuck buddy Victoire. I don't think Victoire is going to be in the Dark Legion too.
That's been our slate. That is a whirlwind way around it. We have summarized it. Let's talk about the pieces that we have on the board. Because here's, as we mentioned, we have not actually figured out what the Dark Legion 2 is yet. We are taping this before we have had our brainstorming session. We have some vague ideas.
Yeah.
We've talked
We
a
know
little
it's
bit.
going to start at the wedding.
Yes, we know that
We have our excuse
Carol
for
and
our
Jenny
characters
wedding is
to
gonna
get
happen.
together again, which is that they're all going to be meeting up again. The band gets back together at Carol and Jenny's wedding.
But we have introduced a lot of new pieces. We have Emotep in the body of Nick Morton.
Yeah.
Seems like that's going to
That
have
one
to
we
get
have
addressed.
to resolve.
Yeah.
That one we have to do.
Nick Morton himself buried in a sarcophagus at the, underground. And then I think because of his tenuous relationship to death has ended up at the Black Lagoon. We know that Nick Morton has bobbed up in the waters of the Black Lagoon.
From the Werewolves of London, we have the potential werewolf cure, which is still in the works. When we last heard about it, Gwen had brought a sample of one of the few working samples they have back to the States for Jennifer Halsey to look at.
Yeah.
But we didn't follow up with that in Phantom of the Opera because there was too much going on.
But we also do have a Phantom of the Opera. We have Claudia, who survived the explosion with a burned, fucked up face.
Yes, and if there's anybody who specifically wishes ill to our newlyweds or to our brides to be, that would be her.
Yes. We also have a giant in the Alps who probably would like to get revenge on Cassie and Victor. And now we have Adelaide Van Helsing, who is, I guess, a good guy in that she wants to kill monsters, but she does it at whatever cost. She's willing to mow down as many people as possible.
Yeah, in Dracula Lives, she kills a waiter because he happens to be standing between her and Dracula.
Yes, she is a bloodthirsty maniac, but with sort of the same aims as our Dark Legion.
Which adds in like a nice cool. So we have a bunch of factions that have different angles on this. We have the Dark Legion, who are more or less just like our moral good, our superheroes.
But also, they're not really a team now.
No, currently they were a team for like a week and a half.
Yeah.
And then they broke up, and now they just happen to have a reason to all be in the same place at the same time.
They have never called themselves the Dark Legion.
No, only Nick has done that, and only after everybody quit.
Yeah, and kind of as a joke.
So, but then we also have, there's Prodigium, who are sort of, at this point, we have reframed them from being S.H.I.E.L.D. to being the Men in Black.
Yeah.
We don't know what their deal is most of the time. We no longer have a character embedded in them except for Hunter, who's kind of on the outskirts of Prodigium.
Yeah.
And Prodigium's deal is they're fighting monsters, but they're very attached to the status quo.
Yeah.
And now we also have Adelaide, who is like a wrecking ball of monster fighting, who has no interest in the status quo whatsoever. She's out to just fucking destroy Dracula or whoever else is on her radar who's potentially a danger.
So we've set up a lot of pieces, and they won't all come into play, I'm sure, in the Dark Legion 2.
Yeah, the Guardians of the Galaxy are not in Age of Ultron, right?
Right. But there's a lot to play with, and there's a lot to resolve. Some of that might not. Can you imagine doing this at the end of Phase 3? Are we going to do this again where we recap everything? Then it's going to have to be 1 minute on the clock for every movie.
I think at that point we say, please listen to the first recap episode and now put this on, because we can't. Although it would be interesting to do it in a way where like maybe we are rested. And we have
that's an interesting idea.
We
like
do it
being
again,
fresh
like,
and
like
having
maybe
energy.
We're not just like powering through, pushing as hard as we possibly can because there are ants crawling on the inside of our eyes.
Not literally.
Not
this is not
literally.
The movie Bug with Michael Shannon.
No, I feel horrible right now.
It is just about midnight, the witching hour.
And I'm a new dad, so midnight's late for me.
Yeah, and
that's the other part of the recap. Over the course of the recording of our show, I had a baby, and Dalton's queer now.
Yeah, we've both had a lot of big life changes.
Yeah,
and we are about to hit 5 hours of podcasting for the night.
Woo!
So,
hey, if you've enjoyed this, It's going to be another 2 weeks before we give you the first part of the Dark Legion 2, the title of which you probably already know, though we don't. If you want to spend that time, we left a lot of the meat on each of these individual bones, whole stories from guests that we haven't talked about, and we talked through the process of it. They're fun. If you're the kind of person who doesn't mind reading the Wikipedia summary of a movie and then watching the movie, you will probably enjoy going back to the beginning and listening to it. And you got 2 whole weeks before there's anything new. So
and if not, you know everything you need to just keep going from here and follow the continuing journeys of these characters. We are not going to stop anytime soon. Their stories will continue to develop and only get more complicated as it goes. So it's a great time to join the Dark Universe. Speaking of, if you like what you hear, we also do have a Patreon. Are You Afraid of Dylan and Dalton?
Legally distinct product.
Yes, not related to the Universal-owned property, the Dark Universe, but just our own stuff. We have a very incredible, engaged Discord community that talks about horror movies and their own creations, and we talk shit and just joke around.
Yeah, also, if you're a fan of this show and you have no one to talk about this show with, we have channels for that.
Yeah, come talk with other listeners.
Yes.
And
you
also
get a free trial of our Patreon right now, assuming that by the time that this episode airs, they haven't somehow discontinued that feature. Go to patreon.com/Dylan and Dalton. That's DYLANANDDALTON, or click the link in the show notes. And please join our Dark Legion for $5 a month.
Yeah, and if we hit a certain goal, we're going to start doing bonus podcasts where we talk about other stuff. We have a whole list of things we want to cover on that, so you'll help us get to that point.
We'll finally do our episode about the Pope's Exorcist.
Yes. And also we do screenings in the Discord of
available films,
all public domain movies that we're allowed to screen. So come watch those with us. We do live chats and everything.
It's a really great crew, and everyone's just very friendly and welcoming and enthusiastic, and we share enthusiasm about each of our own, like people share their own creative works and stuff in there, and we're all just a very cool, supportive, fun community, and it's great to hang out.
On all social media at Dark Universe Pod, on Twitter, Instagram, and now Blue Sky.
Pretty cool.
And you can follow us individually. I'm Dalton Deschain. You can probably see it in the show notes how it's spelled on all social media platforms. And
I'm at Dylan Roth everywhere that matters. Oh, except for Instagram. There's another Dylan Roth who's a fascist. So don't confuse me with him, please.
Oh no, you have an evil twin.
I do. He's like a Republican YouTuber. He's fucking really cool.
Write him
He's
into
like a big
Dark
Trump
Universe.
guy. Yeah, and then
we're gonna make a character named Dylan Roth, but it's not you; it's the other Dylan Roth.
Surely the darkest timeline.
We are gonna go both die and then hopefully be revived by Nick Morton the Mummy in time to write the Dark Legion 2.
Hey, thanks for listening, everybody. This was surely our. It was one of our episodes.
It was the most episode of them all. We love you all. Until the Dark Legion 2 is at the top of the box office,
stay afraid of the Dark Universe.